District number 73. Thank you, State Assembly Member Dan Short and Dr. Jeff Ascherman for being here. We'd like to start with reading bios off of campaign website. Assembly Member Dan Ford. Dan Ford serves as an Assembly Member for the 73rd District of New York since being elected in 2011. Dan served on his local community board for 8 years, where he served as co-chair of the Transportation Committee and chair of the board's Second Avenue Subway Task Force. After a career in private practice, Dan was elected to serve in the New York State Assembly, where he currently chairs the Legislative Commission on Administrative Regulations Review. Guided by his experience as a pro bono and ATV criminal defense attorney, Dan has made criminal justice reform a central goal of his legislative agenda. Dan has never stopped fighting for working families on issues like transportation, funding, cleaner air quality, and increased school construction. Dan and his wife reside in the Upper East Side and are proud parents of 2 children.
Dr. Jeff Ascherman is a professor of surgery and site chief of the Division of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery at Columbia University. He is taking this step into politics as he is concerned about the lack of a medical voice in the New York State Legislature. Dr. Ascherman believes in high-quality care for all people and wishes to be a strong advocate for all New Yorkers on a statewide level where so much healthcare legislation is passed and where there are so many opportunities to advocate for patients. This step is a continuation of his community service on Manhattan's Upper East Side, where he has served as a public member on the local community board, working on a variety of health and social service programs. Dr. Ascherman has lived on the Upper East Side for 20 years, where he and his wife have raised their 4 children. The rules for this forum. Each candidate will have the opportunity to make a 90-minute opening statement. After the opening statement, there will be 20 to 25 minutes for the question and answer portion of this forum. All questions will be asked by us, the moderators, and they will include a select number of audience questions. Each candidate will have approximately 2 minutes to answer each question. Each candidate will receive a 10-second warning and then a stop indicator indicating that their time has run out. Finally, each candidate will have the opportunity to make a 1-minute closing statement.
We will begin with the opening statements for the 2 candidates running to represent New York State Assembly District number 73 in Albany. We will begin with current New York State Assembly Member Dan Court, followed by Dr. Jeff Ascherman. Assembly Member Court, would you like to begin?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you to Lennox Hill, Neighborhood House, and all your good work. And thank you to some of my constituents and others who are here today to listen to Jeff and I debate. This is an important part of democracy, and I thank Jeff for being here. I think running for office or re-election should be about an extension of what you've done in the community in my work in Albany. As the biography about me indicated, I've been in this neighborhood and in this community since 1989. I was awarded as one of the city's top pro bono attorneys by the Chief Judge of this state in 2003 and continued my work housing or running a pro bono legal clinic in this neighborhood for 5 years. I also served on the community board for 8 years. Look forward to talking about transportation issues relevant to this my constituency in this neighborhood during the question and answer period. I'm running for re-election for my 4th full term for years 8 and 9 in the state legislature to continue my work both on improving the air quality in this neighborhood, which I've effectively done through a low-interest loan program that provides incentives to property owners to retrofit their boilers. I'm also running for re-election on the good work that I've done in the legislature on expanding resources to the MTA's capital program, the lifeline of our transportation infrastructure. So I look forward to your questions and my answers on them, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Assembly Member Court. Dr. Ascherman.
Thank you so much. So if I heard correctly, you said I have 90 minutes. I can speak for an hour and a half. I'm joking, obviously. But thank you so much, and I appreciate all of you for coming to listen, and I certainly appreciate Mr. Court and all the service he's done for the community. As was said, I'm a professor of surgery at Columbia, where I've been for over 30 years, and I've been director of the plastics division the last 14 years. But I've always wanted to do work in the community. I thought it's important outside the hospital. So for many years, as was mentioned, I was a public member on the community board, on the Health, Seniors, and Social Services Committee. As a matter of fact, we had a number of meetings in this very room. And what I liked about being on that committee was when health issues came up, I was the only physician. I felt that I was really able to contribute, to make a difference. Questions came up at every meeting that I was able to help with because I could give firsthand experience. So recently when I found out what to me was an astonishing fact, that there are 150 people in the assembly and they're deciding all this health care and no physicians, I thought there too I could really make a difference by helping my fellow Democrats and Republicans, and really all patients and all New Yorkers by being a physician there. And you may say, what difference does it make? But for example, I was asked to support a bill to limit pre-authorization hassles that we all go through when you want to see a doctor on a test. And I could have had patients with cancer who had to put off the test because they couldn't get the authorization. So I think I could make a difference there. And I've also, as was mentioned, lived in the neighborhood a long time, raised my family. I want to help on quality of life issues, homelessness, MTA, and public safety. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ascherman. We would now like to begin with our first question. What do you see as the top 3 issues for the East Side community? If elected, what steps would you take to resolve these problems? And I'd like to begin with Dr. Ascherman.
So actually just quickly mention 3 that for me would be top priorities. One is public safety, decreased feelings of safety as you walk through the neighborhood. I've lived in New York City since the 80s. I remember when there were problems, and it really got better. And I think the last few years we've seen it go backwards. And I think some of that is because the police have more restrictions on them, more limits. I think we need to give them the freedom to do what they can do so well, which is really to protect us, to protect our families, to protect our schools. And sometimes I'm sad when I hear some of the villainization that happens more with our police force. We're really putting their lives on the line to protect us. So I think we need to support them and give them resources. The second area is the homelessness. I remember from my time on the community board, there are programs, but I don't think most people know about those ones. I didn't know about them. So I think they need to be better supported, better utilized. And it's not just putting people in shelters, but it's also retraining for jobs. It's low-cost housing. It's mental health services. Our patients, if they don't take their medications, they can become very disoriented. So if you provide those medications, it can make a lot of difference. So we need to support them. And thirdly, the other issue I mentioned was the MTA. And I think when you hear statistics like it costs 4 times more to build a foot of subway or a mile of subway in this city than any other city in the world, the issue is we need not necessarily to raise taxes or taxi fares, but we need to use those monies more effectively to increase signal upgrades so that trains can be coordinated more on time, improve stations, and so on. So those are 3 areas that I think really affect this local community.
Thank you, Dr. Ascherman. Assemblyman Court, would you like to respond?
Sure. 2 issues I'll talk about, and then one in response to Jeff. Transportation and the homeless problem throughout the city of New York. On transportation, I've said very publicly, part of the problem with the MTA's capital plan, the lifeline for our infrastructure projects, track and signal work, is the lack of dedicated sources of revenue to the capital plan. What you have on the operating side for salaries and pensions are more dedicated sources of revenue. What you don't have for the construction of the extension of the 2nd Avenue subway or track and signal work along the Lexington line is a dedicated source of revenue to ensure every 5 years when we negotiate the MTA capital plan that the essential resources are there. So I support many different plans about ensuring a high level of funding in the MTA's capital plan. On homelessness, obviously the city is putting more and more resources into the problem, but it still exists. Part of the problem is the failure on the state level. We had a subsidy in place to help people on the precipice of being evicted. So we have between 18,000 and 60,000 people in housing court on the precipice of eviction, but a subsidy that went to help these people, because wages are flat and rent keeps increasing, was cut or eliminated at different times over the years by different mayors and by the state. What we need to do is find funding for that critical subsidy program to help those on the precipice of eviction who we know will be evicted if they don't get help. Lastly, just to respectfully to point out to Jeff, crime is at an all-time low on the east side. Any suggestion to the contrary is factually inaccurate. So we can have our opinions about the level of safety and how things are in the neighborhood, but we should never veer away from a fact-based analysis. Crime is low on the east side. And that's for a whole host of factors, but not the least of which is we have great officers in the 17th and the 19th precinct. So let us have a debate about how best to police the neighborhood, but let us also not stray from the facts.
What? Are there any rebuttals or?
Currently, roughly 60,000 people are sleeping in a shelter each night in New York City. And since we were just discussing the homelessness question and that issue, I want to ask both of our candidates, what policies would you support to protect tenants living in rent-stabilized or rent-controlled apartments? And at the same time, how would you go about encouraging landlords to make repairs to their buildings, to repair their boilers? We had an audience question focused on the fact that the permitting process is so long and cumbersome that their landlord hasn't been able to make repairs to their building. So obviously that's a lot to go into in 2 minutes, but can you please share your thoughts, and we'll start with Assembly Member Ports.
There's a lot of information in the question, so let me try and pick apart 2 or 3 of what the mayor's office, this is not a state function, has worked on different things to streamline the process of the Department of Buildings. Some has been successful, not to my level of satisfaction. I personally intervened for property owners to streamline the approval process. So I know firsthand, having worked for constituents or property owners, whether they have properties in my district or reside in this district and have properties elsewhere, about how cumbersome the Department of Buildings. There's been progress, but not far enough. Secondly, rent stabilization comes up next year in the state legislature. My voting record is very clear about supporting rent regulation and ensuring that we do not expand vacancy control beyond a legitimate means. We are losing thousands of rent-stabilized units over the last decade in the 73rd Assembly District, so that's an important issue for the next legislative session. I think the answer to the last part of your question, something I went into in my answer before, is the homelessness problem, the subsidy. A lot of the resolutions have to come at the city level. More and more resources going into the city level. That is a good thing. Comptroller Stringer wrote a report about how to use vacant lots. That's a good idea. But even from shovel to ground to construction, you're talking about a 2 to 5 year period before we can build more housing units. What we can do at the state level is try and put money into the subsidy program. There is a fixed population in housing court 1 paycheck away from eviction. We know that. Through our partners at the city council level, we need to work on expanding that subsidy, making families aware of it, so we avoid eviction. Because once families are evicted, then we put even more pressure on the shelter budget, the shelter population, and that's not a budget or a housing and shelters that can afford another 10, 8, 12,000 family units. So I think I've answered all 3 questions. That's a comprehensive way of some of the things we need to do on all 3 of those problems.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Ascherman?
Sure. So I too support, the idea of rent stabilization. I think without an increased supply of housing, which is hard to get in New York City with all the regulations, it's important to protect our elderly and other people living in rent stabilized buildings. I think one has to consider, the landlord's concerns. I know, for example, as a physician, my costs go up constantly with salaries, with rent, with utilities. So I think there has to be some cost of living built into it, but I think basically the concept of rate stabilization is very important to protect those so people do not lose their housing. I think we should be creative about other ways to provide less expensive ways of living. For example, I know Bloomberg brought in some prefabricated units. I think 55 or like 290,000 each. I think that was a creative solution to expand. And so I think, that has to always be a priority, not to have people losing their homes. There have been other programs that perhaps should be further considered. The Mitchell-Long laws, the land use laws, 421A laws, which those are programs which help to keep low cost or medium cost housing in the vicinity. So I'm very mindful of that and respectful, and I want to protect people so they're not forced out of this neighborhood by more expensive. And since I finished a little early, I just want to mention that I know Mr. Court, as he said, that overall the crime is down. I totally agree with that. I was just referring to certain segments, like some burglary that are up, and I would love to see everything go down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ascherman.
to touch a little bit on public safety. We had an audience question. What policies do you think the state and city government should implement to protect its citizens from crime without infringing on their rights? And I'd like to start with Assemblyman Ford.
First, it's important to state that the men and women of the 19th and 17th precinct do an incredible job. These are the jewels of the NYPD. Commissioner O'Neill has said so, at least privately to me. It's the men and women who go to work each and every day that do a great job. So it's important to recognize that. The budget for the NYPD is wholly through the budget of the City of New York. So there is not a direct funding from the state of New York. That being said, there are things we can do at the state level to provide resources and funds to the NYPD. We can help with things such as smartphones, also different types of technology that officers can use in the field to get greater information in a constitutional way about things that they're investigating. So there are certain programs at the state level that can go to provide resources to the city, but at its core, the NYPD and its high level of functioning is a function through the city budget. So that ultimately is where the solution lies, but I think on the whole, at least here on the east side, and the numbers bear this out, that crime is low, that responsiveness by the precinct is high, and those are good things and things to be proud of for the precincts, both 17th and the 19th.
Thank you. Dr. Ascherman, would you like to respond?
Sure. I mean, to me, one of the, and as I alluded to this before, one of the main concerns I have with the safety, and as I said, overall, I know numbers are down, some particular areas are up. It's also what I sense both in the subway and on the streets, which is a lack of civility, a lack of respect, people just not treating others well and getting away with it, and I feel that that's extended toward the police. When you hear how sometimes people talk to the police, that didn't used to happen. And I think there has to be a change in the culture, again, to realize that the police are here to help us and to protect us. And when you have different issues happen, yes, there are bad eggs, and there are bad physicians, there are bad rabbis, bad priests, there are bad policemen, but overall, most policemen are great. And I think the tone should be to thank them for what they do and not villainize them. For example, I have some patients who are police officers, and they tell me how their captains and their chiefs tell them not to put a single thing on their car, their private car, marking that they are police officers because they may be attacked. And that is so different than the environment that I grew up in when they were respected. So I think with that culture of realizing they're here to help us, if people would do that and there would be less criticizing of them, I think then they're also able to better do their job and not be afraid that if I touch someone, if I try and do something, I mean, obviously they have to do within the law, but I think sometimes they're so afraid to do what they need to do.
Thank you.
All right. So our question for this fourth one is, do you believe that the Cuomo administration is doing a good job of combating corruption in Albany? I'd like to start with Assemblymember Ford.
They need to do a better job. It was part of the debate last night for the gubernatorial debate, where obviously the issue came up, and part of the problem is the rulemaking, and part of the problem is individual conduct. We learned the hard way in the legislature that you always have to answer for the lowest common denominator. So when your colleagues take shortcuts and end up in a federal indictment or in a state indictment, it speaks to all of us, and it hurts all of our ability to do our job. And there's certain things that can and should be done that haven't been done to fight corruption. It's not in the federal law. Quid pro quo is illegal under federal and state law. It's about different rules that can be put in place to de-incentivize people from engaging in illegal conduct. For instance, campaign finance reform. That would be an important thing to de-escalate the importance of money in politics. Ultimately, if someone wants to engage in felonious conduct, they will. But under a different campaign finance system, that would be important, and I think it would be helpful. Also, I have different bills about increasing the tools that district attorneys can use. Why is every investigation and indictment of an elected official at the federal level. It's because district attorneys at the state level don't have the same tools as the federal government to investigate. So these are some of the actual legislative things we can do to increase or decrease the level of corruption. Also through the appropriations process, that is an important thing. Where the government gives away billions of dollars in capital, there needs to be greater transparency. I have voted multiple times in the Assembly for legislation that would create oversight and transparency and detailed records whenever the state spends money on capital money, as was the example with the Buffalo Billion. Those laws were not in effect at the time that money was spent. That was a mistake. And I'll stop there.
And Dr. Ascherman?
Thank you, that's a great question. As you know, I'm a practicing physician, I'm a father, I'm very happy actually, my son's just walked in. I'm happy to see him here, but I haven't been immersed up until now in politics the way I am now. And I've learned so much, and during this process, I've realized where so much, I don't want to say where this corruption comes from, but I see how it happens. And it hasn't been that way in where I practice in the medical field, but I sense a culture that if we support you, we expect something back. And that obviously doesn't apply to everyone, but I think it's that way of thinking that has gotten so many people in trouble. I think it's a long, slippery slope. We're going to donate here, donate there, and then can you do this for us? And, I'm happy to say that I haven't taken any contributions from any, unions, major organizations. I think that's okay to take some of, but it should not be a quid pro quo system. And I think, therefore, one of the ways to help corruption, and as I've been in this process longer and longer, is I see the need for term limits. I'll give one example. As a physician, malpractice is a big issue on the minds of all of my colleagues, and it's very expensive. And I was always told, though, that it was never going to come before the Assembly. Don't waste your time, even though this is one of the most difficult states in the country to practice. Physicians leave, I was told, because Sheldon Silver, the speaker, has said he's not even going to consider it. And I could never understand that. And then when he got in all this trouble, and you heard, well, he supported, let's say, by certain trial lawyers, personal injury lawyers. Again, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you respect boundaries. But then when you start doing things for them back, then I understood why he would never consider, malpractice reform. So I think term limits, let's say on speakers, on committee chairs, even on the governor would help to resolve this problem. And I've become a stronger believer in term limits after sensing some of this culture.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ascherman.
While the city is considering expanding its train into Harlem, many people have complained about repair shortfalls and issues with routine maintenance. How do you think the city should balance increasing features of public transit versus preserving existing services? And I'd like to start with Dr. Ascherman.
Thank you. I think certainly extending it beyond where it is into Harlem would be a great thing. I think it's really helped, revitalize parts of the east side, particularly more east. It's taken a lot of congestion out of the 4, 5, and 6 trains. And I think there's a lot of plans you hear about to increase funds to do this, the taxi fares, congestion pricing. But as I alluded to before, I think it's not raising these fares and raising taxes. It's using the funds that we have. You hear these things like it's so much more expensive to build a subway here than else. Well, where is that? You hear these things, but what does that actually mean? So I've looked into some examples. This is what I've read, for example, I've been told by others, that a boring machine, which is needed to build a subway, I've been told in other cities the rules are 4 or 5 engineers. In this city, the regulations require 22 engineers, and that these engineers are paid, let's say, $100,000 a year. And I think, if we could learn from every other city that builds subways, that we could do less expensively, let's say more competitive bidding, more emphasis on the procurement bump, that we can get more dollars to do what we want to do without having to increase fares and taxes. And the focus should really be on, resolving some of these issues where we're paying way more in this city than anywhere else. And that's what I'd like to see the focus be on, so that we can get the services to help everyone in our community without raising costs.
Thank you, Dr. Ascherman. Assemblyman Force, would you like to respond?
Sure. Obviously, the New York Times expose on the 2nd Avenue subway was deeply disturbing. We need greater oversight. There are different pieces of legislation that require greater transparency. But I'm here to tell you it's a it's not a legitimate argument, nor a factual one, to suggest that we have the resources now to take care of all of our transportation problems. It's simply untrue. Andy Byford of the MTA set forth a $19 billion plan that we will have to consider next year in Albany. That would go to a lot of the track and signal work on the Lex line as well throughout the entire system. But the Riders Lines and other reports have looked at the full price tag of rehabilitating not just our track and signal work, but our subway stations that are falling apart, rails that are falling apart, off-site facilities that are required to actually run the trains through the tunnel, computer-based train control, which is used on the L line, of course, until it's out of place. And that price tag is over $100 billion. So yes, we need to have greater oversight. A dollar wasted is a terrible thing because that's a dollar out of the taxpayers. But we are being disingenuous with the 19 million people of the state of New York if we suggest that we do not need a huge infusion of cash and huge infusion of budget capital money to really address holistically our systemic problems with our transportation system. Those are the things I've been committed to since I've been in the legislature, the things I've fought for, working with others to get an extra $1 billion to the MTA capital plan. But on the single most important quality of life issue that affects my constituency, that affects the city of New York, we need to be honest about the true financial commitment that it'll take to get us to a state of good repair.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ford. We'd like to move to closing statements. I want to remind you that you have 1 minute to perform your closing statements, starting with Assemblyman Ford.
I want to thank Jeff for being a gentleman, and I see your son here. You are too young of a father to have a son of that age, but Jeff is someone I have a great amount of respect for, and I hope this debate was somewhat interesting. It takes guts, I said in the newspaper, to run for office, and it has been my greatest honor for 7 years to represent the 129,500 people of the 73rd Assembly District. I would just, one issue that didn't come up that I'm really committed to, I have a newsletter in the back, is about the state's sexual harassment policy. I took on the Department of Labor saying its policy was insufficient, some of the words were incongruous with each other, and that the state needs to be a leader on sexual harassment, and I don't think we're doing enough. So that flyer is in the back. I hope people on the way out will take a look at it, but I thank everyone in the audience for listening, and I hope I've done enough in my 7 years in office and tonight to instill some confidence in me, and I hope to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ascherman?
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words. As I mentioned, what really made me decide to run was that I thought I could really contribute on healthcare issues, a resource for everyone and all parties, and help all New Yorkers. And I want to work on quality of life issues. But I'd also like to say that some people, I think, feel they're kind of left out of politics now, that one party's moved too far to the left, the other perhaps too far to the right. And if you're looking for someone who is more centrist, I hope you will strongly consider voting for me. I'm a physician. When I see a problem, I try and solve it. I try and tune out all the background news and just get to a solution. And that's what I would like to do in the Assembly. I'm very happy to work with Democrats and Republicans alike, just to make life better for people on the Upper East Side. And that's what I would do. I don't owe anything to anyone. I just owe things to my constituents, to the voters, and that's what I'm committed to, and I will do my best. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all very much for coming. Let's thank our kids. Thank you all for coming out to our attendance forum tonight. We have a safe trip home.
And I think everyone knows we're back here again next Thursday for part 2 of this series with 2 additional races.